welcome to Be Now for Tuesday, October the 17th. I'm joined as usual by Fazal Khan. Faz, how's it going?
I'm great, Don. How'd you like that new intro?
I thought it was like an intro to John Wick 4, basically, I was listening to. I was expecting, somebody to come out and start firing guns and killing people and stuff like that.
Oh, no. Let's not talk about guns and killing people, Don. That's not a good topic.
It's a really snappy sound thing you got going there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to have to change it if you're thinking about guns when you hear that.
It's a movie trailer, right? Action-packed. That's what we give people, action-packed.
It was supposed to convey the drama of the topics we cover.
Well, that too.
Serious topics we cover in this.
All right. So what kind of serious topics are we covering tonight, Faz?
So today we're going to talk primarily about the Doug Ford government. There's lots going on there.
Sure.
He's 1+ years into his 4-year term. Is he going to last 2.5? Well, let's say 3 years. Is he going to last another 3 years, Don? So we'll get into that. But first, last week when we started back, I forgot to ask you or to let our viewers know that you may not look like the kind of person that rides a bike, but you are a bike rider and you got an e-bike.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I'd love to hear your feedback on e-biking and just riding around the city.
I find it great. Well, and I know that basically we talked about getting a bike for a long time. You were the first to get the e-bike from Rad Power. So I waited until you got one and then went through the training stages so I could actually, before I bought mine, to go and get one. So yeah, I did get a Rad bike, a power bike. It's a Rad Power 3 step through or step over. Anyway, it's a good solid bike. I mean, it's the big fat tires. It's not a foldable one like you have, but it's a good solid bike, and it's 500 watt on the charge.
Which is the maximum.
The maximum in Canada, right? Yeah.
In the US, they go up to 750 watts.
Yeah, you can go to 750, but Rad sells the 750 in the United States, but only 500 in Canada because of the classification. Anyway, it's a lot of fun to ride. I mean, it's good. It's got the power assist like you have. The batteries, you can probably go just on the battery alone somewhere around 70 kilometers. So that gives you a big free range, and a change of seat with we talked about that before. It gives you a little bit more comfort. Shock control when you're driving around and going from the curb down. But yeah, to me, I love it. It gives you a flexibility of going different places and using it. The only thing I have a back rack on mine. But I think eventually I'm going to have to get a rack in the front because, you're carrying different things and you're picking up different things, and there's not really enough space on the back. But I think you need a front carriage to put stuff in the future. So that's probably what I'm going to be buying next.
I actually bought a trailer from Amazon for the bike. I've used it a couple times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it definitely gets a lot of notice. Like the bike in itself, the way I use the bike, anyways. I put all the gear on, my gloves, my helmet. I got lights. I got the jersey and the pants, and it's all black because that's what you get from Amazon. And it's like and my bike is white, so I get a lot of stares. But I also want to be visible, right? So that's an issue at nighttime. But my helmet has a flashlight at the back. I've got headlights. I see a lot of people out there, especially around the dusk time. They're on sidewalks too, and that's when a lot of pedestrians are out walking.
Yeah.
And at least in the late summer, it's dangerous because these cyclists are going fast. I try not to ride on sidewalks. I use the multi-lane paths, but sometimes you just have to because there's no other option. So. And people, I'm sounding like a driver now, but people don't know how to walk on multi-path walkways because, you're supposed to walk on the right side, right? And then pass on the left, but they're like straddling the whole multi-use path. And then when I ring the bell, they're like, oh, which way do I go? And you got to slow down.
I've noticed that a few times myself, where a lot of times people are on their phone with their earbuds looking down at the phone. They're not walking I got to slow down and hey buddy, keep your head up sort of thing. But I mean, that's basically what our society is now. Half the time people are looking down at their phones and they're walking through stores or they're doing everything, right? So they're oblivious to what's going on about them. To me, it's kind of crazy.
And I'm also seeing lots of scooters, lots of
Yeah.
different mobility devices on the multi-use pathways. I'm just shocked that some of the, I think these are more regional roads like Derry and Steeles. There are chunks of it where there's not even sidewalks.
No,
Um,
no.
so, and I'm not riding my bike on Derry or Steeles, right? So you've got to find other ways around. Sometimes there, if you're crossing over, I try to walk across some of the big intersections because you're supposed to. But I feel like a goof sometimes because there's like two or three other cyclists riding across, and here I am walking across. So laws are enforced for drivers, like tinted windows we talked about last week, but also for bikers. You need to follow the rules.
Well, the thing is, when if you're having a city and basically, people have transportation options, right? I mean, bikes have been around since what, 1890 or something like that. So they've been around for a long time. Cars around 1900. Bikes were before cars, so um, people can use any kind of mode of transportation, but at the same time, you're driving a big, Ford honking pickup truck thing that weighs like 5,000 pounds. It's 2.5, 3 ton, and someone's on a bike. I've seen people cross over into the bike lane and stuff like that. So that's a whole different thing. But you need protected bike lanes if you're going to have a bike infrastructure through the city. We talked about this many times before, but I am 100%, convinced that like you have to have barriers. If you go to any big cities in Europe, they're protected bike lanes. They have a barrier, concrete barrier, pylons, stuff in there, because driving on the road without I've seen too many distracted drivers, like we said last week, cutting into the bike lanes, parking in the bike lanes. You need a mode of transportation for other things throughout the city other than cars,
but
and you got to make it easy.
ideally, you shouldn't share the road, right? Like, if you need a protected bike lane. But I think we're fairly lucky in Brampton. We have a lot of paths all over the place. They're not as connected as I'd hope they should be. I actually rode my bike recently from where I live, which is the south side of Brampton, all the way to the lakeshore. Like straight south. It was like an hour and a half drive,
Yeah.
and it was mostly paths in going through Mississauga. There's a couple times where I had to get in on Air Mills Parkway, but I was surprised at how pleasant it was. And to me, that's the best way. I don't want to interact with cars, to be honest.
No, but at the same time, I mean, like if you have a big city, like I said, if you go to like Paris or Madrid or any Barcelona kind of big cities, London. People use bikes to get around, to go back and forth to work and go back and forth to shopping. It's not just, pleasure riding, right? So, they've made the infrastructure for the city to be able to cut down on pollution. Some cities, they have 1 or 2 days that there are no cars allowed in the inner circle of the city.
That'd be really nice.
And if you come in there, it's like you can't get in, right? They blocked it off. So I think Paris does that every Sunday or Saturday, Sunday, no cars in the inner core. So there's certain cities that do that, and it makes it easier for cycling infrastructure to be able to, for people to use it on a regular basis, right? So you have to ensure that people are going to use it. You just can't throw paint on a road and expect that to be infrastructure for people to ride, because there's too many. I don't know if you've seen it on social media, but the RCMP out of I think it was out of BC, they put a video together, and it was like talking about, well, pedestrians should, it's a shared responsibility, cars and pedestrians, about safety. They had this girl wearing a hoodie, crossing the sidewalk and stuff like that, but the driver was distracted and blah blah blah. Anyway, it looks like he'd hit her. And it was like everyone is like, it's a responsibility of the driver who's driving a 4,000-pound vehicle to ensure that he's watching the road and not picking up his phone and doing stuff like that. But that happens all too often, right? It's not the pedestrian. The pedestrian, they were using a crosswalk, walking when they're supposed to be walking, and it's like. Check it out anyway. It's on the.
I've seen it. They're sharing the blame on responsibility, not the blame, but they're sharing the responsibility, when at the end of the day, it's the driver who has most of the responsibility. But as a pedestrian or as a rider, you have to take precautions. You can't assume anybody's
No,
watching.
I realize that, but like when you're growing up, it was like look two ways before you cross. But if you're hitting a crosswalk, I'll give you an example. Like if you go to Europe again, I bring it up because they're way ahead of us in this regard. If a pedestrian is standing at a crosswalk, just standing, there's no lights, there's no flashing. Cars stop and let them go. Pedestrian has the right of way. You try and do that here, forget about Brampton. Just try and go in Toronto when you're standing at a crosswalk.
Yeah,
Right?
people aren't even like they're rolling through stop signs.
Oh,
Like we
yeah.
talked last week, there's no enforcement of basic. I wouldn't even call them. They're not even laws. It's like basic rules of just how to behave on the streets, right?
Yeah, and it's a mindset as well because over in Europe, a lot of times when you go to eat, like even small towns in Portugal and stuff like that, people they stop and it's like, yeah, that's what they do, right? So,
Yeah. Okay. Well, enough with bikes, Don. I
yep,
know there's a lot of people who don't have bikes and don't like bikes and probably hate us now. Um,
it's okay.
you know, so there's a lot going on since last week in the Middle East. I think we all saw what was going to happen, which is more civilian deaths. And today there's news
Yep.
of a hospital being bombed, and now there's blame being thrown at both sides. And we're not here to identify what happened, right? Because whenever
Yeah, well,
something
we're
bad
not
happens,
there,
you're going
and
to get
you've got
multiple.
different, you've got Al Jazeera, you got different news networks, you got different people, putting their slant on the ground. So, you know, the hospitals and stuff like that, no matter who did it, whether it is
Yeah,
Hamas
it was
or
highly predictable, right?
yeah, well,
Civilians were going to die.
in unfortunately, there's going to be collateral damage, and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage in this war, like the war before, and the war before that, and the war before that, right? So,
Yeah.
in any conflict, civilians are the ones that really, suffer the most on a regular basis. I don't care which war you're talking about; civilians take the brunt of it, and that just is the nature of war. Down through the centuries, it's always been that way. Unfortunately, this conflict in the Middle East is only escalating. Netanyahu said basically, it's going to be what? How did he phrase it? Something about a major payback or something like that, right? But you got Iran involved. You've got Syria. You got Lebanon. You got the Gaza Strip and Hamas. So
It's a tinderbox, right? The U.S. is going there with their warships. It's just not going to end well, and level heads need to really step up on the world stage. You and I are not going to affect anything,
no.
but we elect our leaders, and I think the thing we all want is peace.
Well,
And right now,
and the thing is, I mean, the United States can get together with Canada, can get together with Great Britain, blah 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 blah. We can advocate. I saw an MP get up in Parliament today saying it calls on the government to tell the Israeli government to stop and pull out. But that's all well and good. But I'm going to tell you something: Israel's going to do what Israel wants to do, regardless of what the other nations of the world tell it to do.
I
They've
agree, but
always
we
been
all
that.
see, just like when the U.S. went into Iraq, we all see the consequences of that, right? We know that there's going to be consequences. Is Israel going to be any safer now for the next decade? I say no, just
No,
because you've got a generation of young boys losing family members or seeing what's happening there, and they now have hate in their hearts, right? And so, like, that's what war causes, I think.
yeah, and this has been going on for a while. And don't forget, I mean, most of that region, you have, I think the majority of the population is basically under the age of 25.
Well, outside of Israel, right?
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
Palestine, right?
Right.
Because the life expectancy is so low,
Yeah.
and so the average age goes way down, and it's and that's who's suffering now, right? It's the young kids who on both sides who have nothing to do with this.
Yeah. And,
Uh,
I heard people talking about, well, okay, why isn't Egypt opening up its borders, right? Just like Poland did with Ukraine, right? The Ukrainians, when the war, they opened up their border, brought them in. So they're saying, why isn't Egypt, why isn't Iran, why isn't Lebanon opening up their borders? Well, I'm going to tell you why, because a lot of time we talked about it last week, because they can't differentiate between who is Hamas and who is a genuine civilian. And they don't want them in that country. they'd rather keep them in Gaza, basically, right? Because they don't
Right,
want.
and as soon as they leave Gaza, are they going to be allowed back in?
Well, that's the other
Never.
thing too, right? I mean, once you go, right? So it's, they don't want to export terrorism as well, right? So they don't want to bring it in. I mean,
No.
it's
Just like how a lot of Canadians and a lot of Americans don't want now refugees from Palestine. Well, Egypt's no different, right? They've got
yeah,
their own problems,
yeah.
and they don't want more problems. So there's I just don't know where this is headed, and I guess we'll see in a week from now again. But I'll tell you, Don, it's not going to be better. It's going to be worse.
Well, in my lifetime, it's been continual chaos. So, do I see any foreseeable future past that? No, I don't think,
No.
unless something dramatic happens that the wounds are basically healed and they can actually say this is your area. Yes, we'll broker a peace and let's get on with our just living. I don't see, like, ever since I've been in my teens, I've been hearing about Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, from Yasser Arafat to.
Yeah, and I'm old enough too to have seen that whole history, and it just seems like we're restarting it again, right?
Yeah, the Golan Heights. I mean, I got guys that served on the Golan Heights in the peacekeeping role, right? It was, the Canadian Armed Forces was involved in the peacekeeping along those Golan Heights. So, is it going to be the same thing? Like, who knows? But Israel's going to do what Israel wants to do. Like I said, regardless of what world leaders say, they always maintain and say, you know what, we're going to do whatever we're going to do, and we don't care about what you guys say.
And I want to differentiate too, just like we should all differentiate between Hamas and Palestine. I think it's time to differentiate between Israel, Jews, and the Israeli Defense Force, because I think they're three different things. I've heard a lot of Jews stand up against what's going on now, both inside and outside of Israel. And the Israeli Defense Force is like, once if they figure out what happened in that hospital and it's the Israeli Defense Force, that's almost as bad as the attack from Hamas, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not good, but there's they'll classify it as justifiable retaliation, right? So it's
and
like
if they do that,
eye.
well, then Hamas is going to say, well, they were justified too, right? At some point, there's got to be accountability.
Yeah.
And nobody should be able to get away with killing civilians. Nobody.
Well, I mean, the whole thing again is like we talked about, an eye for an eye makes the world blind, right? So, you're in that situation where it's an ever, complete cycle of violence after violence, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, enough with that, Don, because, we're very polarized, and there's going to be a lot of people who hate what we said or I said or hate what you said, and a lot of people love it. We need peace. Hopefully we can all agree on that, and how we get there. That's where the disagreement is.
Yep.
So now, Doug Ford, is he done?
Dougie boy.
Can I eat my apple while you're talking?
No, that's Pierre. That's Pierre Polyev. We're gonna do that segment next year. Next week. We're gonna talk about the federal politics.
I have more apples.
Yeah, well, I'll get mine, and then what kind of apples are they?
This is a red one.
It's a red one.
Gala, I think.
It's a Marxist apple. So basically, you're eating a Marxist apple. Is that what you're telling me? Okay.
No, it's.
We'll get into the apple eating Pierre Polyev next week when we talk about federal politics. I'm sure between now and then he'll have made another gaffe, right? He seems to put his foot in his mouth. The only time he takes his foot out of his mouth is to change feet, apparently. So
it's to eat an apple.
Yeah. Okay. So is Doug Ford finished? Well, it doesn't look good for Doug Ford, but the thing is, you've got, what has he got, 2 more years or 2.5 more years before the next election?
Almost 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. So my big thing is the NDP or the Liberals going to present some sort of challenge? That's the big thing.
Well, what's the NDP leader's name again?
Maria Stiles.
What's the first name? Mary?
I think Maria Stiles.
Okay, Stiles.
Yeah.
Leader Stiles. This is half the NDP's problem, right? You got to get your name and your branding out there. Marit Stiles. Thank you, Karen.
Stiles. Okay.
There was the way she dealt with. Was it Sarah Jama? Is it Sarah Jama?
Yeah.
It's in public. You deal with those things behind the scenes. You come to an agreement, and then as a party, you come out and everybody's on the same page. to have basically a public disagreement, and which something Doug Ford can take advantage of, is a gaffe. But I actually like what she's doing in keeping the fire to Doug Ford in terms of the greenbelt. Now there's questions about the minister, the MZOs that have
Yep.
been issued under Doug Ford. Doug Ford is now under an RC. The Greenbelt plan is under investigation by the RCMP, a police organization he has no control over. And we all know how we backtrack on the Greenbelt. I think he's lost all credibility, and so I don't know how how he can over the next 3 years do anything significant.
Well,
Can
we'll
he
see
win
how.
again? I think he can, because I don't think the NDP or the Liberal are going to be able
Well, we'll
to.
see basically how long it takes for the RCMP to do an investigation. If it takes them 4 years, then
It will.
they
This
have.
investigation is not. Whenever it
Well,
comes to something like this that could bring a government down, they're not in a hurry.
no, but at the same time, I mean, the accountability, they can't let it drag on past the next election. They have to actually bring up something before then. An investigation of this size. And don't forget, he's under investigate. Well, they're not under investigation, but the Ontario Place thing, that the more you hear about what's coming out on that, that stinks even more.
Exactly right. So the only thing Doug Ford will have accomplished after 8 years is maybe some progress on the Ontario line. Ontario Place, to me, that since Doug Ford has been on council, that's been in the works. And now with what we're hearing about this $500 million parking lot or parking garage, it's, I don't know anybody that loved this Ontario Place plan to begin with.
No, and the thing is, it's supposed to belong to the people of Ontario. The whole area was supposed to be developed for Ontario, not for Toronto. It's supposed to be a situation that, you know what, all Ontarians own that. So, like, he's giving basically a 95-year lease to a spa company, a thermo spa company, and apparently the CFO is, I forget, I read the news, but he's connected in some way. He bought Doug Ford's deck of labels. So, there's
Yeah.
it's like when you see that map on, they're trying to track a murder and they've got people's heads and strings attached and everything else. Is just, to me, it's
There's
there's
too
too
much
many
there for there not
questions.
to be something, I think,
Yeah,
is
there's
what
too many
people are thinking.
questions rather than answers, and at this point in time there is no answers.
Yeah. And then locally here we have the split up of Region Appeal, which
Yep.
I don't know about you, Don. I don't see any progress on that. I think it's a hard thing. I'm not sure it's happening, at least in the time frame that the
I
Doug
don't
Ford
see
government
anybody.
said.
Well, what, we have a year and a half left before the breakup appeal.
No, it's January 2025. That's like not a year and a half. That's less than a year and a half.
So I haven't heard anything about in regards to what's going to happen with Peel Health, which we talked about last week. The Peel Police, what's going on with the Peel Police? What's going on with the water and the sewage infrastructure in regards to Peel? Peel Paramedics, what's going on with that? Peel District School Board, what's going on with that? Like, these are all region of Peel
Well, and then
situations.
there's a whole, the human services side, all the social services that the region is responsible
Yeah.
for. Um,
Public housing, Peel
yeah,
Public Housing.
yeah. I don't know how all these challenges are going to be addressed in a year. I know Bonnie Crombie is the one that kind of pushed that. So it'll be interesting to see how Bonnie Crombie deals with Doug Ford. I think she's flip flopped already on the Greenbelt. She
Oh
was
yeah.
kind of in favor of it, and now she's fully thinks we should protect it. Now she's saying she's against the 413, which I think to be honest, I think she's always said that. But the Minister of Transportation is now actually my MPP, right? Prabmeet Sarkaria, and he's full steam ahead with that 413. I think nothing obviously is going to start in 3 years on the 413. I'd
No,
be
and,
surprised if it
and
does.
as far as I know, I mean, the federal government was talking about they're going to basically, do an environmental assessment on that before, and they have the right to do that. So,
Well, I think there was some case, some legal case that basically said it was in favor of Ontario. So, I'm not up to speed on all that kind of stuff, but I think it benefits the Ontario government what that court case came back and said.
Well, we'll find out. But the thing is,
Yeah.
from my perspective, you take a look, you have to have either the NDP or the Liberals, get their stuff together, right? And that's being nice, because at this point in time, I'm not sure when the leadership convention is for the Liberals, but it's got to be very soon. And Bonnie Crombie, she's got a war chest there of $1 million, a lot from developers and so on and so forth. So, money makes it easier, but I haven't heard really that much from any other candidate.
Right. I
Um,
definitely, it's got to be Bonnie Crombie's leadership to lose. Um, and once that, I think that the leadership contest is this year. Karen's always up to speed on this stuff. I think it's the end of this year, and then locally we'll start seeing all the jockeying for positions for both the federal conservatives and the provincial liberals here in Brampton,
yeah.
because as everybody knows, we've got 5 liberal MPs and 5 conservative MPPs, and it looks like both governments are not well liked anymore. So there's a lot of change in the air.
Well, we're going to talk about it a little bit about that next week in regards to the polls. But you and I talked, the polls that they're coming out with. They're not doing they're not doing man in the street polls. I'm not sure how they do a poll. Let's say they're taking a poll of Bramptonians, right, about on the federal level right now. We're just talking about the federal level, right? Who would you vote for? Trudeau or Poilievre? Well, we have 5 Liberal MPs, but there's no nominations for any of the 5 Conservative MPs. So
Yeah, so who are you
there's
voting? Like, you're not, like, when we go to the polls, we
yeah.
don't vote for prime minister. We vote for our MP, right?
Right. So you have no, like, in our 5 ridings, not one conservative nomination has been ratified. So you don't know who's running. So a poll saying, "Oh yeah, Poilievre is going to have 290 seats and the Liberals
Yeah.
90." I mean,
3 years out of an election,
yeah,
like, the polls are useless. I
yeah,
agree.
and it's all up in the air. It's like there's no way, right?
Yeah. And Justin mentioned this about the Minister of Transportation, Sarkaria. Yeah, the word is obsessed about the 413. I'm not saying anything about Brampton Transit. Like, there's a lot of transit needs in Brampton. The big one is the LRT connection to downtown Brampton GO
Yeah.
station. That is a critical one, right? The city needs that much more than they need the 413 on the north.
Yeah, and don't forget, we have a lot of, like, the big thing is we have a lot of people. What is it? I think it's the last one I saw is about 60% of the people leave Brampton to go for other jobs. So public transit is a big part of it. Absolutely. I know that Brampton Transit is one of the rapidly growing transit use in Ontario.
In Canada.
Yeah, it has been going up like crazy, right? So,
And
you know,
you just have to drive by I drive by the Gateway Terminal at Steeles in here,
yeah,
Ontario, on a regular basis, late at nights. That place is always jam packed. The buses are jam packed. I know that the Amazon and other warehouses are in Brampton, and they provide relatively decent jobs for people. But that's still an important need, is the public transit to get people
well, you
around.
got students as well, right? So you got students that are taking the buses, right? Because we don't have a metro system here, right? So they're taking the buses for the students. They're taking the workers coming in to work in the, like the Coca-Cola plants, the food processing plants. Amazon, you mentioned, you have a couple of big warehouses north of Mayfield Road. So you have a lot of those people coming in. One of the only ways you can get around, because you're talking young people, is public transit.
Or bike, Don. You can do it
Well,
in bikes. I don't know about a wintertime. I'll let
you're
you
not
guys
biking
know.
from to go to the University of Toronto or something like that all the way into
True.
Brampton. Right?
True. Yeah. Yeah, it is easier, Mike, for you guys to go to Union Station by transit, because what would you take? So the Dancies live on the northeastern part of the city.
Yeah.
So
Well, if you take the
would you
ghost,
drive to Vaughan and then take the subway down? Is that what you would do, Mike?
yeah, but it's like if you want to go to Union Station, you can grab the GO, right?
Yeah, 100%. Is now on the weekends as well, and I've done it a
Yeah.
couple times already. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bramley GO train. Yeah.
Right. And I used to drop my wife off there all the time when she worked in downtown Toronto. So I mean that's a jam packed one as well, right? So the GO station you have a lot of people using transit, but Go is another one that is packed in the morning and the afternoon as well.
Okay, Don, we've hit our 30-minute time limit, and I'm
Okay.
sure you and I can keep chatting a long time, but I'm sure nobody else wants to hear us talk, and they're going to start tuning out on us.
All right. Well, you know what? Next week we're gonna tackle Mr. Apple Leader Pierre Poilievre, and we'll talk about a little bit about the federal situation in regards to popularity in polls, and Jagmeet Singh and what's going on with his. They just had their convention,
Yeah.
and like I said, I'd like to see some sort of action plan from the Liberals and or the Liberals and the NDP going forward on how they're going to work against the Ford government. I think there's an opportunity to basically, there's just too many questions in regards to ethics and morals with this government. They just sort of shrug it off. Don't forget.
And that's one of the reasons why they got elected, right? Is because of the Kathleen win and the Dalton.
Well, it was stop the gravy train. That was the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the gravy train apparently is in Queen's Park.
Yeah, it's a high-speed gravy train now.
Yeah. And the gravy is dripping off their mouths like crazy, right?
Okay, Don. Yeah. So next week is Justin Dunn. Is that the topic?
Yeah, we'll talk about Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre, the Apple eating,
Yeah. Well, just between me and you, because nobody else is watching now, Don. We've had the opportunity to interact with Doug Ford. I remember when Kathleen Wynne was premier, we interacted with Kathleen Wynne. The Green Party, Andrew Horwath, everybody. The one person that's never given us the time of day? Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, that's true. He comes into town. I mean, he comes into town. He does the ethnic media tour, right, with our 5 MPs. We've put in many requests to talk to Justin about the situation, and through our MPs, and we've got absolutely nothing back in 5, 6, 7 years?
2014, I think they got in.
2014, yeah.
2015,
Exactly.
8 years. 8 years.
Yeah.
And we're not even told when he comes to town. So and now it's coming back to roost, right? That behavior, you've got to be open to all media. You got to have, public media scrums.
Well, especially when you're sitting with 5 MPs in a region like ours, and we're not by any means a major news outlet, but at the same time we do deliver what's going on, and we do talk, and we do videos and stuff like that. So situation is you post a picture. Oh, I was at this, Gore Meadows. Okay, so big deal.
I was at this ribbon cutting.
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah, big deal. So what?
And all the ethnic greetings, just no. You need to start answering the real questions.
Yeah.
And now the times are hard. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll see if people swallow the common sense from Pierre Poilievre without any platform. But there you go. You're not even listening, are you?
Can you elaborate a little more on that? What do you mean, Don?
Yeah, who told you that? Who told you that? I want names.
Sure.
Anyway, all right, Faz, we're gonna call it a night because I got stuff to do. I got to go and write Pierre Poilievre a letter. I got to order a bushel of apples, and then we'll.
I got to finish my apples. See everybody.
There you go. We'll talk next week.